What's your favourite Pokemon game? There's been a few generations with a lot of different competitive formats. They're all kind of fun if you know what you're doing. Mine isn't even a Pokemon game, it's Goomble 2, a Scratch game made by the greatest to ever use the website, Clabs, and it's way too big for the website. It's split into 6 Scratch projects, 5 parts of the story and 1 that's optimized for online battles, and there's over 400 Goombles to play with. There are 5 types a Goomble can be: pepper, oil, chalk, neutral, and glitch. Pepper burns the oil, which soaks the chalk, which crushes the pepper, and then neutral and glitch don't interact with those types and are just super effective against each other. But here's the thing about Goomble, it's not Pokemon. Everything Clabs doesn't like about competitive Pokemon, they took out of Goomble 2. The main things are no IVs and no RNG involved in how a Goomble's stats are distributed. Every Goomble of a species starts out with the same stats and no hobby, and it's up to you to build your own Goomble. Honestly, there's a lot less luck involved overall because all moves are 100% accurate and there's no critical hits or damage rolls to worry about. It's super easy to create a Goomble and get it to max level, then give it 3 Ts and a stat-changing hobby, which is like Goomble 2's equivalent of a Pokemon's nature, and your Goomble can be competitive within like 5 minutes of catching it. They also replaced the breeding system where you walk around with an egg. Now you just have to combine 2 Goombles and mix their stats to create a new Goomble with a different stat spread. And there's seemingly infinite ways to combine 4 Goombles into one, and every Goomble can inherit any one move from their parent. But every Goomble's base stat total is 500, except Goombles that can evolve, which are all 300. Technically no Goomble is unviable. The difference between the Goombles is how these stats are distributed. Because Goomble 2 is inspired by competitive Pokemon, there are a lot of Goombles with 1 or 2 good stats, and nothing in any of the other stats. That means every Goomble has a specific role. Honestly, because it's so clear what hobbies are good for each Goomble, you also don't have to worry about damage calculations. 1 stat point is hardly ever the difference between winning and losing. This video is about a tournament for Goomble 2, with a format kind of inspired by Pokemon's video game championships, ScratchRunning Turbo Mode, in June 2025. In Turbo Mode, everyone brought 6 Goombles and played best of 5 sets, bringing a different combination of 3 Goombles to every game. This game is so fast-paced, the more games are played the better, but for the game's first competitive format we decided on best of 5, because we only had a week, and not everyone was available at the same time. We would do first to 20 with all Goombles unlocked, but we had other tournaments to run. Go check out Turbo Mode, it was awesome! A record-breaking 6 people entered this Goomble 2 tournament, which is a lot for a Scratch game, especially one as difficult as this. Sometimes it feels like you need a PhD in Goombles just to get through the single-player story, but if there's one person with those qualifications, it's Clabs. Not only did they enter Turbo Mode, but they also helped me with my team. But let's talk about the team that they built for this event. What 6 Goombles work the best together to cover all their matchups? Well, there's one Goomble Clabs absolutely will not be leaving behind. The Goomble that flips the Chapter 5 metagame on its head? Looper. Looper is a very interesting Goomble, with a unique passive ability that swaps its opponent's strength with magic, and defense with magic defense. This is really important in a meta where all the Goombles only have 1 or 2 good stats, because a hyper-offensive assassin like Versar or Trausis can end up with an offense stat it can't even use. Or a tank whose only stat is defense is now vulnerable to physical attacks, including the 0-cost basic attack that every Goomble can use. So if you get Looper, what can you do about it? Well, the Goomble's stats go back to normal if you switch it out, but then your opponent can just switch back into Looper. So if you have a mixed attacker, it doesn't matter as much if Looper swaps its offense stats, it'll still do damage. That's why Clabs put Haruspex on the team. This is normally a physical attacker with a little bit of defense, but Clabs gives their Haruspex a bit of magic, so it gains more defense with its ability Otherworldly Presence, which increases its defense when it gets hit by a physical attack. It also has the move Suck instead of Demolish Spirit, so it can hit pepper types for super effective damage, and its passive also gives it the move Nox, which is a magic attack. This way, if Looper switches in, Haruspex can use Knocks instead of its other moves, and hit Looper for super effective oil-type magic damage. The next Goomble on the team is the Wizard, Magus. Magus has high magic attack and defense and HP with no physical bulk or strength moves. If Looper switches in, Magus switches out. But this is good for it, because its passive Pepper Wizard gives it an extra 10% mana every time it switches in. Magus just loves casting spells. It's on the team to output big magic damage with its moveset of purely offensive magic missiles. And it does that job pretty well, because it has Cantrip and Dark Vision for type coverage, and Missile Storm's its strongest move for when it gets its mana up. There is another Pepper-type magic attacker on the team, but this one has a lot more magic defense, Gulal. Gulal gives its opponent the move Paintball 1, which it can throw at Gulal to give it Paintball 2. This goes on for a few turns with different coloured paint, but I've never actually seen Paintball 3. The game's just too fast-paced. Klabs' Gulal replaces the status move Dance with the oil-type move Dissolve, which does damage using its magic defense, which is a great move for Gulal, even without Stab, and some much-needed type coverage against its Chalk-type Ops. Dark Flowers and Fire of Yesterday also scale on magic defense, so Gulal really doesn't want Looper to switch in. There is also a physically defensive Goomble on the team, a tank that takes a little bit of setup to use right, Wyvern. A hybrid of Whelp and Biliony, with a lot of physical defense and a passive ability that builds up a hidden stat called Corruption. Every Goomble that uses Corruption has a different effects with it, and Wyvern can heal itself with a basic attack, as long as it stays on the field and invests in the bees. Because a Goomble's Corruption stat is the only one that doesn't reset when it switches out, Klabs uses this to their advantage by aura farming, switching out, and then the next time Wyvern switches in, it gets more defense based on its Corruption. The healing move Plunder also gives it Corruption, which makes it even bulkier. So if you want an oil-type physical defender that can take a lot of hits, Wyvern is the Goomble for you. The last Goomble on Klabs' team wasn't actually used in any games, but it is an interesting setup Goomble. Zykreen. Zykreen can gain Corruption when it basic attacks, and it deals damage every turn based on that Corruption. It can counter stallers by building up Corruption, then using Harvest to really ramp up in the endgame. And actually, its strength and magic are almost the same, so it kinda doesn't care about Looper's passive. Klabs' Zykreen has Armor Slam instead of Smack, so it can do damage with strength and defense stats, which also scales up with Corruption. This is a really cool Goomble, and I would have loved to see it in action. These Goombles all work together by having different stats and focusing on different opponents. If you see Hyper Offense on the enemy team sheet, bring Looper and a tank. If their mains are all Oil type, bring 2 Pepper types. In these single battles, the Goombles don't always work together directly, but as long as they have different strengths, they can cover each other's weaknesses. Everybody knows that, that's why the key is usually to have one Goomble of each type. Anyways, ScratchRunning Turbo Mode started on the 9th of June, and the players had a week to organise their matches and Goomble their Gurts. You can watch all the sets on Klabs' test account, link in the description. Turbo Mode was a double elimination bracket, and since Klabs made the game we seeded them first, which means they skipped round 1 and had to wait for me and Galasta. I, with my unbeatable strategy of a big fish, a tank, and a gimmick I thought would be fun, lost all 3 of my games and went on to be eliminated in losers round 1. So, winners semis is Klabs versus Galasta. Let's look at the team that just sent me to losers bracket. There's Nar, whose main goal is to blow up, Queppy, who changes its type and can heal itself, a shiny Catalaxy that just has a high magic stat, a Tutorialis that just has a high strength stat, Carouse, a very silly guy that does its silly dance, and the fan favourite, the evil and intimidating Hemlock. When Hemlock enters the battlefield, it gains a lot of stats, probably enough to knock out 2 or 3 Goombles, but all of its allies faint. That said, you can just send it out last, so you still get to use your other 2 Goombles and then finish the game with Hemlock, right? The Mad Lad loves this thing, and I like killing it with Subscrish, because it really doesn't have speed or magic defense, only HP and strength. Don't get me wrong, it is a powerful Goomble, just use it wisely. Game 1 begins with Clabs sending out Wyvern into Galasta's Tutorialis, and immediately you can see something else unique to Goomble Gurt 2. You can see which Goombles are in the back. This lets you prepare in advance and try to figure out your squad's matchups. And as you can see, Clabs has the Looper ready to go, and it loops the Tutorialis, which loses all of its strength and does a clean 7 damage with its snap. Clearly it can't stay on the field with its stat swap, so here comes Queppy. And it's at this point that I realise how hard it is to click through his text without losing focus. We're going to be seeing a lot of Looper in this video, and it applies 4 different statuses to its opponent. The first KO of the game was a long battle between Clab's entire team and Galasta's Queppy, which ended up getting looped and finding itself unable to use Mend to survive Fraxel poisoning. Galasta switches in Catalexy, and Clabs uses Looper again to make its T-Splash useless, but its basic attack is now really good, and Galasta gets the KO on Galal, who doesn't have any physical defense. But you know who does? Wyvern, which tanks the basic attacks and a paintball to finish off the Catalexy with plunders. Then to finish the game, Clabs uses Looper on the Tutorialis and keeps it on the field, securing the KO with a cantrip. In game 2, Galasta has to adapt. His Catalexy manages to get a basic attack off before getting Magic Missile, the Queppy KOs Galal with its own paintball, and Hemlock gets sent out third, with 442 strength and over 1000 HP, and out comes Looper. Suddenly Bite does no damage, Galasta can't switch Goombles, and Clabs uses Looper's Magic Missiles to take game 2. So now what? Game 3 starts with a switch into Galal, who KOs Catalexy with Dark Flowers and then tanks an explosion from Narnar. Then Wyvern chips at it, Looper weakens the Queppy Star Blast and deals super effective damage with Magic Missiles to take game 3. And that's the power of Looper. If it counters your team, it just wins. And if there's one other person that knows that, it's the other Goomble Gurt professor, the man that's been yapping about JRPG stats for most of this game's early development. Also known as Arx. His team consists of a Slam Crawler whose signature move Crawler Gambit is replaced with the Pepper-type Life Drain move Siege. This makes it purely a physical attack, but it can use its defense stat to deal damage. He also has a magic attacking Shake Loon that heals itself if hit by a magic attack, a physical attacking Scruddle running rapid fire to hit 3 times for oil type damage, some glitch type representation in a Paragon, another physical attacker with a lot of health, a physical assassin in Duelist, the fastest Goomble on the team, and Pottle, a magic attacker whose Pepper type Melody has been replaced with Puffy Plume for better power scaling and Chalk type coverage. The Plume also sets the opponent magic stat to 10% until it uses a move, so it might actually be useful against other magic attackers. Just looking at the stat spreads to write this script, it looks like a lineup of 1-stat Andes that really don't want to see Clabs' face-down trap card, Looper. So naturally, Clabs brings it in the back for game 1, leading with a trusty Galal. Arx leads with Slam Crawler, then switches it out for Shake Loon as Clabs immediately sends out Looper. Then they both switch again, Clabs to Haruspex and Arx back to Slam Crawler. Now this is what Looper gameplay looks like. Arx gets the first hit, but Looper forces him to switch to Shake Loon again. Clabs' Galal manages to burn it before it switches to Scruddle, which applies the Hunter's Mark to Looper. This status causes it to take more damage from physical attacks for the next 10 turns. A few turns go by, Clabs uses the Looper to weaken a Siege from Slam Crawler, but Arx switches to Shake Loon to land a real hit with an unlooped Milkshake Blast. Clabs brings out the low health Haruspex into Arx's Scruddle to reactivate Looper's passive ability next turn. The Sting does no damage and the Poison removes none of Looper's strength, so Arx has to switch again, back to Slam Crawler, which lands a Chalk Silk. Even with the Hunter's Mark, it doesn't quite KO Looper, so the Slam Crawler goes down to Magic Missiles. Scruddle comes back out, unlooped, and clicks Sting to finish off the Haruspex that's just switched in. Of course, this means Looper gets to come out for free, then switch back to Galal, who can tank Scruddle's Rapid Fire and force Arx to switch back to Shake Loon. It doesn't even do anything, Arx wants Scruddle on the field, but Clabs can just send Looper back out for free. This looper has had low health for so long, even a looped attack could KO it, so Galal has to come back out. It uses Share Pie to heal itself to full, then a Dissolve finishes off Shakloon. Finally, Arx only has one Goomble left, and cannot switch it out. One last looper proc from Clabs, and Scruddle loses all of its health to the Fire of Yesterday. Clabs wins Game 1. Clearly Arx is more equipped to take on Looper. His team loses to it, but he's really good at switching Goombles to unswap the stats, and it shows. What I want to figure out is how does the game progress if both players have more than one Goomble? If Looper keeps coming in and out, and the guy with 2 assassins keeps switching because Goombles can't do damage, who wins? The key is to have the defense advantage. That's why Galal could stay on the field against Arx's magic attackers and use its spells to do damage when Clabs predicts their opponent not to switch. So knowing that you need the defensive advantage, Game 2 begins with Clabs bringing both of their defensive Goombles, Galal and Wyvern, and Looper. Arx's Shakloon gets the first hits of the game against Looper with a basic attack, and then switches out to a Paragon. A Paragon is a physical attacker, so Clabs needs to bring in Wyvern, but right now, Clabs has clicked Fractal, and the 2 turns of Fractal Poisoning take Arx's Paragon to below half health. Arx switches back to Shakloon to take advantage of Wyvern's low magic defense, but Wyvern tramples it twice and switches into Looper. Now the T-Splash doesn't do any damage, so Arx has to bring in his 3rd Goomble for the game, Pottle. He clicks Puffy Plume, but Clabs switches to Galal. Not only do they have the magic defense advantage here, but they also disabled Puffy Plume with the Paintball passive. Paintball 1 doesn't do any damage, and Galal can use Fire of Yesterday on Pottle to effectively take it out of the game. Arx switches to Shakloon, knowing that Pottle's next turn on the field will be its last, and he clicks Basic Attack, predicting that Looper would come in and boost its strength. If Looper takes another hit like that, it's out. And Arx can't do anything else with Shakloon when it's looped, so both players switch out. Pottle's still on fire in the back, so of course the switch was to a Paragon. So Clabs brings out the physical defender, and uses Trample to bring a Paragon to its last hit. And to finish it off, Clabs switches into Galal to get the KO with the passive that throws a paintball on switching. And now there's a magic defender on the board, for free, that can take a hit from Shakloon. Chalk-type moves are super effective against it, but it's not enough. Dissolve does the oil-type damage required to take out Shakloon, and Arx's last Goomble is the Burning Pottle that had 1 turn left to live, and couldn't use it to take out Clabs' 2 remaining Goomballs. Clabs wins Game 2. But it was close. Arx can still bring this back, right? At this point, it's clear that the 2 defender setup is working for Clabs, and Arx thinks his team is losing to it, so he changes it up again. Game 3 begins with Clabs bringing back Galal, and Arx leading with Pottle, and here, at the very beginning of the game, Clabs makes a read. They click Dark Flowers, a Pepper-type move, and Arx switches to Duelist, an oil-type Goomble, which faints immediately. Now Galal has the status Not a Coward, which reduces its enemy's strength for 2 turns as long as it stays on the field. So Arx switches to Slam Crawler, and Clabs brings in Looper. After a magic missile and a few more switches, Clabs manages to keep Galal on the board and click Dark Flowers into Slam Crawler. But it wasn't enough. With his Slam Crawler at dangerously low health, Arx has to switch to Pottle. He gets its stats swapped by Looper, and Arx manages to take advantage of that by doing a basic attack right before fainting to a cantrip, and Clabs closes it out by throwing a paintball at Arx's final Goomble. Arx was sent to Losers Finals and finished 3rd after losing to someone I'd never heard of before ScratchRunning Turbo Mode, a mysterious Goomble prodigy with the name Ossitace. Ossitace was introduced to Goomble Gurt 2 by Arx and joined the ScratchRunning community just to play the game at Turbo Mode. When he signed up for the event, Arx was the one that DM'd me his team, and it has a lot of guys with only 1 good stat. For Magic Attack, a Poffle. For Physical Strength, Rust Boys, which is Kitty and Katsukito in a big car. to protect against being switched in, a Gibbous. To sweep with a powerful mixed attacker, Patron of Winter. This a man, a weird Goomble that faints if it doesn't knock something out with its passive ability. And the key to all of this, the only other Looper at Turbo Mode. There's a few things to notice about this team, and not just the hyper offense style. 3 of them are Chalk type, 4 of them are magic attackers, and of course, Ocetace has a Looper of his own. But does he know how to use it? In Game 1, Ocetace leads with Looper and gives Klabs' Galal some physical defense. Now, if you have Looper on the field and your opponent is a magic defender, you want to use little kicks, right? Use a physical attack on the guy with no physical defense, but Ocetace didn't realise that the Galal does have physical defense here until it was too late. With no moves left, he has to switch to Gibbous, and Klabs gets to switch to Magus. Gibbous is an anti-switch attacker. When it switches in, it heals 10% of its max HP, and all of its enemies lose 13% of their health every time they switch in. Like a hazard setter, like Spikes or Stealth Rock, but on a passive ability instead of a move. But it's fine, because the Spikes can't do damage if Klabs doesn't switch out, and they don't need to. Magus weakens the magic attackers on Ocetace's team, and Gibbous doesn't even have magic defense against its dark missiles. So he switches to Patron of Winter, a mixed attack that gives its enemy more health in exchange for more offense. Merry Christmas, Klabs! Here's a Patron with Infected Bite instead of Smack. This strange decision from Ocetace skews his big Christmas tree entirely towards magic attack, and despite its power, it can't one-shot Magus. So Klabs sees an opportunity to fire some cantrips into the Pepper-type magic defender, and then switches to Galal. And then right back to Magus because Galal almost died from one turn of Fractal Poisoning, and Ocetace switches to Gibbous. Gets another layer of Moon Spikes out, cool I guess, and then it explodes. Goomble Gurt 2's explosion is a magic attack that does damage based on the user's current health. A few small problems. Gibbous is at half health, and Klabs' Goombles all have magic defense. So here's Ocetace's big idea. Switch into Looper before the status effect actually does the damage, and then the explosion will actually kill. However, Magus is built different. It still tanks the hit, and the cantrip from Looper, and Klabs switches to Galal. After this, the Goombles are all at low health. Ocetace's Looper can kill Galal with little kicks and then outspeed Magus, and now it's a 1v1. Looper versus Looper, and Klabs uses a basic attack to take game 1. It was a close game, almost an even matchup. The Goomble Gurt newcomer almost defeated the Professor. But just like arcs before him, he lost game 1, and now believes he has to change his approach. So what's the new approach that's going to bring Ocetace back, this time for sure? Game 2 starts with Ocetace's Gibbous immediately setting up that status I was talking about, you know the one, with Looper and Rust Boys in the back. Finally a physical attacker. And now, the really interesting thing about this game. Despite the hyper offense on Ocetace's team sheet, this is the one game in Klabs' tournament run where they don't bring Looper. They simply don't need it here. They'd much rather use Haruspex on Ocetace's Looper. And on all of his other Goombles, because he's brought 3 Chalk types. The question is, does he know Klabs' Haruspex has Nox, the oil type magic move? Maybe not, because he switches to Looper, swaps Haruspex's stats, and Klabs reads it. They clicked Nox knowing that it's super effective against Ocetace's entire team, and expecting him to use his Looper, which actually survives the hit, but is very low on health. Ocetace clicks Magic Missiles, expecting to deal super effective damage to the Haruspex, but Klabs switches to Magus, and Looper dies to the next turn of Nox damage. And now, the fan favourite, Rust Boys! Using Scratch to one-shot Magus, but Klabs still has Haruspex to resist Rust Boys' attacks. Because Haruspex outspeeds Rust Boys, it can use Retaliate to deal super effective damage, and then punish Ocetace for attacking it. Ocetace's last Goomble is Gibbous, whose main purpose on the team is support, And like a wise YouTubist once said, if your race car driver faints, you can't rely on the pit crew to drive the rest of the race. And all this hazard setter can do is defend itself and get chipped away by Gulal's dissolves. Clabs takes game 2. Ocetace has one more shot, and he starts game 3 with Puffle. This actually counters Haruspecs really well, and both players know this. Ocetace clicks magic missiles, and Clabs switches to Looper. The defensive play worked out well for Clabs, and now Puffle is a physical attacker with no physical moves. It has to switch out to Rust Boys, and lose half its health to a cantrip from Looper. Clabs manages to use Gulal's paintball to disable a snap, and then switch back to Looper to disable a scratch. Ocetace switches to Puffle, which loses all of its health to a cantrip. Looper, the MVP, forces out Rust Boys, because for some reason Ocetace's third Goomble in this match is This-A-Man. Remember, if This-A-Man switches in and its passive doesn't KO, it rage quits. Ocetace can't send it out here. Clabs switches into Gulal and sacrifices it because they don't need it against a Goomble with no magic attacks. This allows them to switch into Looper for free. Clabs defends their Looper, which has priority over switching Goombles, and I only learned this when they did it at Turbo Mode. And Ocetace's This-A-Man shoots and misses and goes home. Rust Boys comes back out, Looper outspeeds it with Fractal, and Clabs takes game 3, winning ScratchRunning Turbo Mode with a total set count of 3 wins and 0 losses. Of course Clabs won Turbo Mode. They made the game. They've had to look at these stats and movesets for over 7 years. They're the most experienced Goomble trainer ever. But it wasn't a complete blowout. All of Clabs' opponents had good teams and used them well. Galasta put up a good fight. Arx was probably the second most experienced Goomble Gurt player going into the tournament, and Ocetace was never seen again. He just played his sets and disappeared. Maybe we'll see him again at Turbo Mode 2, coming soon, and like... Now I know what you're thinking. That's a lot of brain power for a Scratch game. And I agree, watching Goomble battles or even reading discussions about Goomble balance can be a bit intimidating. But I promise, Goomble Gurt 2 is more accessible than it looks. The first few chapters are surprisingly simple, and there's an easy mode if you're really just interested in catching all the Goombles. The story in this game is absolute cinema, and honestly all of Clabs' Scratch projects are unlike anything else on the website. If you've ever liked Pokemon, you'll love Goomble Gurt, and I cannot recommend enough that you give it a try. Anyways, that was the Goomble Gurt 2 tournament. Good night!